Right. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases Director Dr. Anthony Fauci saying that some of the thousands of emails released earlier this week by various news outlets were taken out of context, including ones regarding the United States funding for research abroad. Join us now, Dr. Scott Gottleib, former FDA commissioner, a CNBC contributor. He also serves on the boards of Pfizer and Illumina. In his new book, Uncontrolled Spread, Why COVID-19 Crushed Us and How We Can Defeat the Next Pandemic, is out in September. And I just want to look at it overall now in hindsight, with the benefit of 2020 hindsight, Scott. And you're an informed observer, but I'm not saying that you were there in the trenches and can answer all these questions. But in your mind, as an informed observer at this point, what do you think the likelihood is that it was escaped from the Wuhan lab versus the wet market? What is is it 50%, 80%? What do you think? How do you handicap that?
Yeah, I'd probably handicap it higher for a natural origin, but that shouldn't be reassuring. I mean, if you were going to handicap it 60, 40, 80, 20, that's by no means reassuring. I think at the end of the day, what we're going to end up with, unless we get lucky and we either find the zoonotic source, the intermediate host, which proves it came out of nature, or we have some whistleblowers, some people who come forward with information in China that proves it came out of the lab, I think what we're going to end up with is going to be unsatisfying, because it's going to be an assessment that assigns probabilities to each scenario. Now, that's going to be important, because if we assess that there's a reasonable possibility that this came out of the lab and the Chinese government has concealed it, that's going to change how we embrace this mission going forward. We're going to have to get our tools of national security much more engaged in surveillance. We're going to have to try to get better oversight and better security around these labs that do this kind of research. We're going to have to try to push more of this research into higher security labs. Remember, the Chinese were doing the research with the coronaviruses in BSL-2 sort of medium security labs, not their high BSL-4 security labs. So we're going to have to change how we approach these things. I don't think we're going to end up with a definitive answer absent something that, is a lucky break. A final point, if this did come out of a lab, someone in the Chinese government knows that. They've had ample opportunity to, make that admission to the world and provide that evidence and try to engage the global community, making sure this doesn't happen again. The fact that they haven't done it by now is a pretty strong suggestion that they won't.
Well, I know I'm not going to get the type of cable fodder from you that we're hearing a lot of other places. I would only say that I guess it doesn't really matter right now whether it definitively came from the lab. The reaction and the coverage and the way that certain agencies responded is very troubling, because the most important thing we were probably going to need to do is try to prevent the next one. So if there was even a 5% chance that it came out of Wuhan, and start with this, Doctor. It's in a city called Wuhan. We know that there's a bat lab that may have been doing some gain-of-function research on these viruses. Now we know that 3 people got sick in November of 2019 and needed to be hospitalized. And to make the leap that it absolutely came from the wet market, when it's quacking, walking, squatting like a duck, and everything looks like a duck, just to arbitrarily demonize anyone or any person or any agency or any media outlet that even intimated that it could come from the lab, something was going on there. Now, where was the WHO, and why are they doing China's bidding again? And where were our people in this country that we should have been at least had our ears up to prevent the next one, that it might have come from the lab? Why was there pressure to bury this?
Yeah, look, a year ago, most people would have said the probability that this came out of a lab was 1% or less. And
why?
That was based on what we knew at the time. Because a lot of virologists based that assessment just on looking at the sequence strain alone, and they surmise, which is still accurate, that all of the genetic diversity seen in this virus could have emanated from nature. But you have to look at this in the context of what we know now, and that is one bit of evidence. Looking at the sequence information is one piece of evidence. The fact that a year's gone by, this has been thoroughly investigated, and we haven't accrued any new evidence suggesting that it came out of a natural origin, but we have accrued some additional circumstantial evidence that it potentially could have come out of a lab, including China's own obfuscation, which has to be a material fact that's entered into this picture at this point. all of that increases the possibility that it did come out of a lab. So the assessment now has to be different than the assessment a year ago. It's no longer a 1% or less probability. You have to assess this to be a higher probability at this point, and it merits further investigation because it does affect how we go forward. You know, final point on this is that I think a lot in the scientific community are having a hard time countenancing the idea that this could have come out of a lab because scientists are well-intentioned. Many scientists here in the United States worked with scientists in China who are also well-intentioned and do good work. They can't understand why, if this did happen, scientists who probably would know about it haven't come forward. We need to recognize coming forward in China is a very different prospect than coming forward in the United States. We saw what happened to those early doctors who came forward with evidence that there was an outbreak in Wuhan. They faced significant sanction. So being a whistleblower in China with the Chinese government isn't quite as straightforward as being a whistleblower in the United States. And I'm not saying it's easy here either.
The three people that we now know that were hospitalized working in the lab, do you think Dr. Fauci, because he did have, you know, a research relationship with that lab, do you think he was aware a year ago of that situation, the three people who had been sickened in the lab? And because a lot of the dogma and the dogmatic statements made by him about this, I don't know how you could have made those if you knew, A, that it was in Wuhan, B, that they were gain of function research, C, that three people got sick and had to be hospitalized in that lab. Would you have been as strident as him about the possibility of it coming from the lab at that time if you knew people had gotten sick?
Well, I don't know when Tony might have known those facts. He obviously has a security clearance and gets briefed. You know, I'm not sure that what happened in November was known in November. Some of this information may have been accrued on a look back. Look, Tony was getting briefed. Dr. Fauci was getting briefed by a lot of the folks in the scientific community who were virologists looking at this sequence. And they didn't make a bad judgment. They're not wrong. They looked at the sequence initially. They had some concerns about it. On deeper analysis, they thought that the genetic diversity that they saw in this sequence could have been derived from nature. There was nothing highly unusual about it. There's things that raise a lot of questions, like the furin cleavage site and other features in this virus. But they surmised that most of the diversity, if not all the diversity that they were seeing, could have been derived from nature. And that's what Tony was hearing from the experts. So, you know, I'm not surprised that he drew a conclusion from that community. That's the community he comes out of. Those are his peers. Those are the people who inform his judgments.
I mean, I even saw him respond to a question, and the question was about whether the virus could have escaped inadvertently by accident from the lab. And he answered the question with saying, to imply that this was a bioweapon released on purpose. He shifted the argument to a straw man that everyone would agree with, to not answer the obvious question about, you know, why the agencies that are there for the sole reason of trying to protect us the next time almost almost buried this story and I don't know why, and I'm still trying to figure out why.
Well,
the WHO, I understand, maybe, but even people here in this country, you've seen some of the emails. Don't open the can of worms. You saw that one, right?
Right. Well, I would challenge your statement that NIAID is an agency that's designed to protect us from the next pandemic. They're designed to do research that will provide countermeasures that will help protect us
and discern features. Needed to get. I think it's very important that we know how
our intelligence agencies. Right.
I mean, how many people
we need to get. We need to get our national security agencies engaged in this mission. We need to get our foreign intelligence agencies engaged in this mission. Historically, they haven't been in the way that I think they're going to need to be going forward, because this was perceived as a mission that was handled by the public health community and the CDC. And we now know that those agencies aren't equipped to provide the kind of surveillance and information gathering that we need to protect ourselves. We need to get the CIA and other agencies that do foreign intelligence work in this mission. It's not the NIAID. The NIAID sponsors research. Some of that research, by the way, some of the research we sponsor is to do capacity building in places where we have questions about the activities that are going on, and perhaps to get a look. I don't know that for a fact, but it would seem plausible that if we want to get a look about what's going on inside labs or get better alignment with them so that we understand what they're doing, we might fund some research. There may be multiple motivations for funding different kinds of research, but the NIAID is not an intelligence gathering agency. We need to get the tools of national security engaged in this mission.
You know, what you're saying, getting our intelligence agencies involved in this, mirrors what we've heard from the Biden administration and getting our intelligence agencies involved with what's happening with these cyber attacks and these ransomware. Are we equipped for that? Just as somebody in government, have we spent enough on the intelligence agencies making sure that they're going to be up to the tasks and the additional tasks that we're now asking of them?
Well, look, the threat's changing. The threat landscape's changing. And historically, this isn't a consequence of the fact that the intelligence agencies weren't interested in a public health mission. Historically, the public health community oftentimes fought to keep the intelligence agencies out of their work. They were worried that every person with a white coat would be perceived to be a spy. So we need to change that, that ethos.
Wow, it's a wide range of opinions, isn't it? And you know, we need to sift through it and be very careful, obviously. But you got totally naturally occurring and a bioweapon, and somewhere in the middle, I guess the truth lies, and we may never know.
Or an accident, right? An accident.
Well,
yeah.
I'm saying those are the two extremes.
The range, yes.
Right. Thank you, Dr.
Thanks a lot.
Check out Scott's new book, Uncontrolled Spread: Why COVID-19 Crushed Us and How We Can Defeat in the Next Pandemic. Squawk will be right back.